Good morning.
Morning.
Kuf Mem Ches Amid Beis. 9 lines from the bottom. Iboilu. Hikdish Kol Nechasav. We're talking about a Shchemira. So Shchemira, who instead of giving away his Nechasim, he was Makdish them. Makdish them to the Beis HaMikdash. Va'amed. And then he recovered. Mahu. Mi amin in Kol Agabe Hekdish Gamru Makni. Do we say, although normally, if a person recovers from a matnas chimera, the matan is rescinded. Maybe when he gives it to hekdesh, that he means to do. He means it very sincerely. Like he probably has in mind that I want to get a recovery. Maybe from the schus I'll get a refuah shlema. Then when he gets the refuah shlema, can't say, all right, now I never really meant it. I need my money. So do we say hektish is even better than a regular matana, that even if it turns out that under normal circumstances, the matana would be bottled because he recovered, maybe by a matana to hektish is not. Or maybe, no, he's going to need what to have to live. No one gives away everything he owns. He can live in poverty for the rest of his life if he recovers. Now I think we'll ask, what about the other Hifker kol nechasav? What if instead of giving it to hekdesh, he was mafker? Mao. What's the so if you'll say that in that case, the person is dumb. So what happens if instead of giving it to hekdesh, he was just mafker? Mao. Mi amin kivin to aflan aziyim kashirim gamroma. Do we say, well, Hefker is not giving to Hegdish, but it does have an aspect of tzedakah, because an ani could take it. So, when he's in Mafkir, he feels like he's doing a good deed. I'm making it available to anyone. I guess his children were wealthy. He saw no reason they needed to be supported. So he's somebody Mafkir, I'll give it to someone who maybe could use it better. So if he's Gamil Makna, even if he recovers. You say, no, in this case, he's not giving it to Hegdish. It's not a full-fledged stalker, so maybe in that case, he's not makna. Now the Gemara says chila kol nechasav laniyim. So let's say you'll say in that last case, that's not a real stalker. You're just giving it to hefker. So therefore, it's not going to be gamaru makna. What about if he taka gave it bedavka to stalker? He didn't give it to hegdish, which we said l'chayra would be gamaru makna, but it's not as shvach as just being mafker. He gave it to tzedakah, real tzedakah. Mi amin tzedakah vaday migmar gamer umakna. Do we say tzedakah is better than hefker, and therefore it's more diamond to hektish? Maybe we say no, unless he's giving to hektish, just tzedakah, he's not willing to give up everything before he dies. Tomorrow teku. Okay, the parentheses is just a recap of that lishna achrin that says that in short. Amar Sheshes. If someone gives a matnas chemira and he says a lashon of yital, he should take, instead of saying a lashon of matana, he says he should take yizka. The person should be zoichen my nechasim, yachzik, he should make a chazaka my nechasim, v'yikna, or he says he should be kainet. Instead of I'm giving it to him, he says you should be kainet. Kulun lashon matana. All of them are a lashon matana that they would be considered to be a lashon of a matnas chemira. Masisa tana, af yachsen v'yaris. Even if he says a lashon of yaris, which is a lashon Yerusha, and yachsen is also Aramaic lashon for Yerusha. Beroy liyarsha. If the person is someone who's shaykh to Yerusha, it's going according to Rebbeichem Ebraika, says that you can give something, you can give your Yerusha to one of the Yarshim if he's a royal Yarsha. You can say that I want that person to go ahead of it. So if we say a Shchemira can give with a Lashon Yerusha, it doesn't mean he could give a Yerusha to someone who has no Shaykhas. We're saying if it's someone who's royal Yarsha, according to Rebbeichem Ebraika, that you're allowed to designate him, that's the same thing as giving a Matana. The same way you could give a Matana, you could also give a Yerusha to this person. Ibailu. Yehena bahen mahu. Dahavi kulo matana ka'amar. If someone says Yehena bahen, I want this person, he didn't say such a great lashon, like we said before, where he's saying yakne, or he said yachzik. But he said, I want this person to have enough from all my nechasim. Is he trying to say he should have enough, that he should enjoy it, it should be all be his? Yehavi kula matana kamar, oiduma lishani minayu midi kamar. Or does he mean to say, I want him to enjoy it, but not that it should be belong to him? It means like if I have a tree, he could go sit underneath it, but I'm not giving it over to him. Yirabahen, what if he says, I want the person to be seen? I have a Maybach, I have a Rolls Royce. I want this guy to be seen with my Rolls Royce. That's what I've got. Does he mean to say that the person should now own it and they'll be seen with it? Or does he mean to just say, no, well, I mean, it just he could take a picture with it? Ya'amid bahen mao. What if he says, I want him to stand? I want him to stand in my possessions. Does he mean to stand as an owner? Does he mean stamazay to stand? Yishun bahem. Does he mean that he could depend on them? Does he mean depend them as an owner, or depend on them? I don't know exactly what that's going to mean. He's going to say he could depend on him if he falls. Like he could fall down on it, but not that he owns it. So I'm going to take all these lashonis are too imprecise, and we don't know whether it's going to be considered a matnish kamir. Iboilu macha kol nechasav mal. What if instead of giving his nechasim as a matana, he sold them? Amr of Yudam Rav im Amad Eina Chayzer. Yudam Rav said one time that if he recovers, he can't be Chayzer. It's not because it's not a matnish chemira, it's a regular matana. If he sold it, I mean, it's not a matana, it's a mechira. You can't say, oh, I sold all my possessions, but now because I thought I was going to die, now that I'm alive, I want it back. Zim Amr of Yudam Rav im Amad Chayzer. No, he says even on a mechira, if he recovers, he can go back to the purchaser and say, I want it back. If the money is still there, then we say that he's Aymed, he's Chayzer. Because he thought that if he's gonna get better, he'll be able to buy it back. So he didn't really mean he only meant it to be Yerusha. He only wanted the person to have it if he dies, but if he doesn't die, he didn't want him to have it. But if he taka spent all the money, that's more similar to a matana. He's given it away. He doesn't have any expectation of getting it back. What is he going to do? He's going to say, "Give it back to me," and you'll be out of luck. I don't have any money. So clearly, in that, it's more like a matna shchimira. It was irrevocable. Shchimira shahoidamal. What about a shchimira? We're talking about all different ways that a shchimira can convey away his possessions. What if he said Reuven was on his deathbed and he says, I own $1,000 worth of land. I owe that $1,000 to Shimon. So he was a maida, haidas baldin kamei edim dami. So do we say that then if he recovers, that haida, that way of conveying the land, was only intended as a matnish chemera, and therefore it goes back? Very hard to understand this, right? Because it's a proof. He's saying that I owed it to him. There must be somehow that we know that this was not. He's saying I don't know. Shimon is saying he doesn't owe me any money. We know clearly that he doesn't owe money, but he's using it as a method of kinyan. Tashma, the Isser Giura, someone named Isser Giura. Isser was a ger. Havali tracer alf zuzi bei Rava, and he had 12,000 zuzi that Rava was holding for him. Rava owed him 12,000 zuzi. Rav Mari was the son of Giura. He was conceived. Isser was his father, but he was his father. He was conceived prior to Isser Giura becoming a ger, and then but by the time he was born, Isser Giura already had become a ger. I don't know what happened with his mother. It's a little confusing to me. But in any case, he's certainly not considered the son of Isser Giura. because Isser Giura is a cotton chanel. When he becomes a ger, he's like a new person. The person who conceived him is not his father. Ubei Rav Havi. He was learning in Bei Rav. This Rabba Rabba Bar Meri. Amar Rabba. Heichi nikninu remeri lahani zuzi. Rava says, I'm holding on to this money. There's no way for Isser Giura to give this money to that so Isser Giura was a shchemira. We're talking about when he was sick. And we were trying to figure out what's going to happen to his money. So he says, Rava said, listen, I'm going to get to keep this money because there's no way for Isser Giura to give the money to his pseudo son, his emotional son, but not his Jewish law son, right? He raised him as a Jew. He was already Isser Giura was already a Yid when Rava Bar Meri was born, but technically it wasn't his son. And he certainly wanted to give the money to his son, but Rava said there's no way for him to do it. Ibi Yerusha la Bayushi. Since he's not miyuchas after him, Rava Meri doesn't have yichas after Isser Giura, so he can't be Irish it. Ibi matana, if he's going to give us a matana, matna shchemira ki Yerusha shavra abana. The matna shchemira, as we've seen this before, a Papa said this, that a matna shchemira has some of the aspects of a Yerusha. We said that before as why you could convey over a halva that's a matana milval peh, even though normally you can't do so. But a shchemira could do it because a Yerush can get it. But it also works the other way around, that a matna shchemira is like a Yerusha. Kol heicha the isa b'Yerusha isa b'matana. Kol heicha the less b'Yerusha less b'matana. Someone who is not in the parsha of Yerusha, there's not going to be a din of shchemira. That's a machlekes rishonim. If that means since Isser was a ger without any descendants, he's not able to be Irish, so therefore he's precluded. Or does it mean Rabba Bar Meri, since he's a Hayrasai Shalai B'Kedusha, so he's not capable of receiving Yerusha, therefore it's precluded. Or it could be it's even both. But the point is, one of those two applied here, and therefore they're excluded from the din of Shchemira. The Chamu not Masak and Shchemira for someone who either gives or receives a Yerusha and who's not capable, who gives or receives a Matna Shchemira, and they're not capable of being Yairish in the Parsha of Yerusha. So you can't do a Matna Shchemira. Even Mashiach, so how can maybe Rabba Bar Meri could be Moishech this 12,000 zuz? Less Nugabe. He doesn't have hold of it, right? Isud can't give it to his son to be Moishech. It's by me, Rabba, and I'm not letting him pass the threshold to get it. Agav Karka, less I'm sorry. Bechalipin, ein matbeya niknas bechalipin. If you're going to say Rabba Isser Giura should take a piece of cloth and be makna the 12,000 zuz with a kinyan chlipin to Rabba Bar Meri. Ein matbeya nikna bechalipin. A coin cannot be nikna bechalipin. And this is talking about coins. It's not talking about karka or metalton. Agav karka less liara. If you want to say he should be makna with karka, Abba Bar Meri had no Isser Giura had no karka, and it's not just doesn't happen to be that way. I mean, because we talked already before, as it's a matna shchemira, so it must be that this is the only thing that he owned. If he owned other things, it wouldn't have been able to be a matna shchemira. I guess he could have given the karka also, but it seems like this was all Isser Giura owned. I was also thinking maybe karka b'derech klal is an achuza. We have all the rules that it always reverts in Yovel to its original owner. So he couldn't have any karka he owned was not. If someone's a ger, it's hard for them to get karka. Even ma'imit shloshton. If you'll say we said that there's such a thing as a ma'imit shloshton. If you have three people there, you can be makna both if someone owes money. So over here, Rava owed money to Isser Giura. So if Rava Bar Meri, Isser Giura, and Rava were all in the same place, Isser Giura can say, I'm giving the money that you, Rava, owe to me, I'm giving it to my son. So he said, Rava said, I'm not going to be anywhere near. If I hear he's approaching, I'm going to make myself scarce. I don't want to, I'll make sure not to be in his vicinity that you can make a ma'imit shloshton. So It happens to be Taisus asks, Taisus talks about that what's going on here that Rava didn't want, was like so eager not to give the money. So I think some of the Mefarshim explain that he wanted the mitzvah, and he had Taisus asked, like, the mitzvah l'kayin divrei hameis. Why is it? So he wanted the mitzvah of giving it over without Isser forcing him to do so. But his intention was to give it to him. Maskeflor of Ika Breder of Ami. So they were talking and learning about this issue, about that it's impossible for Isser Giura to convey over this money to Rabba Bar Mary. So Rav Ika had an idea. Amai, Veloidi Isser, the Holm Zuzi, the Ramari Ninu. Let him make a Haidah. Right? This is our original question. Whether you can give a Matnish Chimer Abi being made. So he's saying in this case, maybe the father can just admit that this is the money. If we're looking at being maida as an alternative way of conveyance, let him be able to be maida and thereby convey the money from the father to the son. He agree kind of with Maida. Everyone thought that was an amazing idea. They were talking and learning. Isser got wind of this suggestion that came up in learning, and he put it into practice. He was maida. Ikbid Rava. Rava was very upset. Amar kamigri tanosel inshi umafsadili. He said, "Listen, if I find out, it's like the Supreme Court leak about the Dobbs decision. He said, I'm going to track down who leaked this eitzah, because now I lost the 12,000 zuzi that, according to the Mefarshim, he was planning to give anyway. But he was very upset that they let out the cat out of the bag, that you can be makna with Haidah. But in any case, you see that Haidah is a legitimate way of being makna, so L'chayr should also work for a Shchemira. Ibaylahu. New question. We're on the top of Kufmen Tes Amud Aleph. Last two words on Kufmen Tes Amud Beis. I'm sorry, no Ibaylahu, but it is another. We're talking about the next part of the Mishnah, top of Kufmen Tes Amud Beis. Shayr Karka Holshu. Shayr Karka Kolshu Matanosai Kayamis. We said in the Mishnah that if someone gave a matana while he's a shchemira, but he left over some of the karka, even a matana of kolshu, even a negligible amount, the matana is mekuyim. It remains a matana, even if he recovers, because it's not a matana shchemira. A matana shchemira is only when you give away everything. If you leave over any amount, according to the Mishnah says, his matana is going to be mekuyim even if he recovers. So more of a kama kolshu. How much is this kolshu? What does it mean? Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, karka kadei parnasase. Rav Yehuda Marav says it has to be kadei parnasase. He has to have, it should be karka, and it has to be enough that he can support himself from that karka. Rav Yehuda Marav Amar metaltal kadei parnasase. Rav Yehuda Marav says, and it's not just karka. It could even be, it's not a machlekes, he's just adding on. You said the case of karka, but the truth is it's even more. It's even if it's metaltalin. As long as it's enough to support himself going forward. Doesn't make a difference whether it's a 401k or if it's a farm. Amar of Zera, Kam Mechavlin Shmaitz the Sabi. Says this is such a they're absolutely right. Both of these Amaroim are correct in what they're saying. Karka time amai the kasamachala. The koi samachala. The reason why he's samech on karka is because as long as he has karka and he has enough to support himself, he could be samech on it in the future. So he's not really expecting to die. So when he gave it away, he gave it away that it's tam. Again, we're talking about where he made a. We always have to say this. Talking about where he made a kinyan. If you just said it b'dvarim ba'alma, it wouldn't work. The taltalinami, and additionally, the second din of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, if they remain by him, he could be saimach on it. But as long as it's enough to support himself, it's not a kolshu. Maskav Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asked the question: my kavanah, madam metaltalin what's the kavanah of the one who says metalton? Karka tanan. We said in the Mishnah, Shire Karka Kolshu. So how could you say, according to the second man the Amar, Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, that even if it's metaltalin, our Mishnah specifically said Karka. Man the Amar Kedei Parnasasoi Kolshu Tanan. Now how could you say it has to be enough for him to live on? Our Mishnah specifically said any amount. Kolshu who means negligible, any minimal amount. Amalei Abaya v'chalhecha detani Karka Dafka. When we say karka, does that always mean that he means specifically karka and not anything else? But tanan, someone who wrote all of his belongings go to his eved. Yatza ben chayrin. The eved goes to be ben chayrin because included in his possessions is this eved. So if someone handed over all his possessions to this eved, if it was a good kinyan, so the Eved becomes a free man because he's included in the possessions. If you remember,
we had a Gemara with the guy who gave away.
That was the issue if you remember from Gittin. The problem is, how could he accept it? An Eved cannot be kind anything. Mashakana Eved come to Rabbi. So he came in the end that he gets. It was a little bit more to it, but the Gemara came to the conclusion that he gets a yad to be kaina himself at the same time. The two things happen simultaneously. Right? Is that what you were thinking about?
We also had that story with the father who gave away all his chasm to the Evan, and the son came and wanted it. And they said, since he can't free the slave, in other words, no, he left one thing.
Right, so we're going to get to the leaving over one thing. That's going to be this is just the setup for the other case. Shire karka kolshu. This is what you're remembering. But if the father said, "I'm leaving over some karka," lo yotza ben chayrin, that he's not yotza ben chayrin. This man, the Amr says that even though he said, "I'm leaving over," the father said, "I'm leaving over. I'm not giving kol nechasim. I'm leaving over some karka." Now, one would think normally an eved is not karka, but since an eved, in some sense, is considered karka, right? He's treated like karka. Lagabi, I think we had it. Lagabi kinyan agav. You could be kind agav karka, maybe agav eved. I don't remember exactly what the nafkamin is, but in some senses, in many senses, an eved is like karka. So even though he said karka, he could have meant the eved. He's not giving the eved, and if the eved doesn't go ben chayrin, then the whole matana is bogus. Because you can't give something mashkan eved kana rabbi. So if he doesn't go free, then there can be no matana to him. So l'chayr we see from here, at this point already, we see that karka does not always bedafka. Even though he said karka, he doesn't mean bedafka karka. If Shimon hu ben chayrin, if Shimon says he's always going to be a ben chayrin, even if he he says, even if he says karka, that doesn't mean the eved. That means something else. It means karka, or it means he's not referring to that. But if he says, I'm giving everything except for 1,000th of it, and the chiddush over there we had in the Gemara was, even though the eved could be worth $1 million, and this guy is only worth $500,000, so clearly the eved is not 1,000th of his possession. It's the eved still is not kind himself, because we're chayshish that maybe the Adam was saying, you're worthless to me. I don't even continue. He might specifically Adarabba, he's referring to the eved, and he's saying you're a worthless slave. It's almost like a way of making fun of him. So I'm giving it to you, I'm giving everything to you except for 1,000, because that's how much you're worth, and therefore you don't get anything. But Amar of Dimi by Yosef Amar Belaza also metaltlin shir etzel eved. He said that the Tanakama said that if he left over karka, then the eved is not going to be nikna, because maybe that's referring to the eved. He's saying Dimi Yosef is saying it's not just if he said eved. It's even if he said metaltalin. Now, one might say an eved is not metaltalin, He's not something that's it's not he's not a cup that you give away. But an Eved, in some sense, is in the fact that he moves around. So Legabe an Eved, if someone says I'm giving everything except for metaltalin to my Eved, then the Eved is not going to get anything because we're going to say maybe that's what he meant is he's referring to the Eved. However, but another din, also metaltalin shir etzel ksuba. The rule is if a husband gives away all of his karka to his sons, and he gives at the same time some piece of property to his wife, that's considered, we treat that the fact that she got a little bit of something at the same time he's giving away all of his karka, that she was maskim to him giving away the karka and getting rid of the lien of the ksuba on the karka. It's as if she was maskim to give up her lien on the karka because she received something. But we say that's only if she got a little bit of karka. But if she got a little bit of metaltalin, that's not sufficient. So that's why. But in any case, that's why that the metaltalin legabe anisha is not considered to be a shear that something was left over for. It has to be karka, which is not really relevant to our discussion. That's to the end of that machlokes. But in any case, like we saw over there, that karka, karka is we even though what was the word that we see over there that even when you use that it doesn't mean dafka karka, right? That was the kasha that he said. On our Mishnah it said karka. It doesn't mean dafka karka. But we see over there he used the lashon karka. He says leaving over, and he meant really the Eved. So you see, karka doesn't mean. So why are you asking for my Mishnah that used the lashon karka? So Gemara, hasam bedinu delay listening karka. The truth is that you can't bring a raya from the fact that karka was used imprecisely over there, legabe and Eved. Because really, it shouldn't use the lashon karka. But I did ton of reisha. Rabbi Kiva, I'm a karka kolshu chayavis v'pei bikurin. The beginning of that mission over there was talking about the actual rules of karka, and we said any amount of karka, chayavis v'pei, if you have to leave over a corner for aniyim, or bikurin, that you have to bring what was grown on it. The lichtav aleim pruzbul, like we've said, we've seen a number of times. One of the nafkaminis of something where there's karka. I think we had this. There's also the Gabi and Eved. We had this question that in order to write a pruzbul, the person has to own some karka. So we say that any amount of karka is enough. To make a kinyan agav, any karka is also good for that. The kesef shtar b'chazaka. If he makes a kinyan kesef shtar chazaka on a kinyan karka, he could be kind of metaltalin with it also. Mishum hachi, but since the Mishnah was already talking about karka, mishum hachi katani karka. Then it said if a person was reserved a little bit of karka for himself, the Eved is kind of. But it didn't mean specifically karka. It just used that lashon because that's what we were talking about. So that's why Reb Yosef had a good question from the previous Mishnah legabe karka. That he said that our Mishnah says karka. Because our Mishnah, we don't have that reasoning of why I use karka. Over there was a specific reason why I used karka imprecisely. And now the second question that he had asked. He asked that our Mishnah says kolshu. So how could the Amoraim say it has to be enough for him to be saimachan in order for it to take away the din of a matnish chemira? Kolshu means kolshu. So but it's not true that wherever it says kolshu, it always means bedaf. V'tanan Reb Doiseb and Hirkin Usaima Chamash Rechelis Geizes Mana Upras. If there are 5, the din of Reishis Agaz is that the first shearing from a sheep has to be brought. It has to be brought to Yerushalayim, and it has to be a minimum of 5 sheep, and each sheep has 1.5 measures of a certain weight wool in order for that sheep to be mechoyev in reishis hagez. Chayev reishis hagez. The chamesh v'chelis goyzos kol shein. The chamesh v'chelis has to be kolshu. I mean, the kama kol shein amarav manu pras. It just means it has to be a total of a manu pras between all five. It doesn't have to be a manu pras for each one. As long as there are a total of 5 sheep. So it says kolshu, and then it says that a kolshu has a shear. So why was Rabbi Yosef asking for our mission that says kolshu? So it can't mean, how could you say that it means enough to be semichan? So no. Kolshu. Really, it shouldn't say kolshu. I did kama shiura rabba amiyu nami shiura zutra. Karli kolshu. He wanted to say, he didn't mean it to say a minimal, any de minimis amount. What he meant to say is a kolshu compared to the way you went, it's 1/5 of the amount that you had said. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yashakayach, and Bez Shem tomorrow at 6:30.